Shalom, shalom, shalom. This is Rabbi Moshe Otero with the Ways of Israel, and we are looking at the Dietary Laws as a review to be a Jew and the diet for the soul. As we've said before in the previous video, you are what you eat. So depending what you eat, that's how you're going to react, and your soul will have an effect. There are obvious forbidden foods that we've reviewed in our last video. Food that basically we have a list of what's considered acceptable, what is permitted for us to eat, and what is not permitted. And you'll see that on page 104 and 105 of the book To Be a Jew. We already covered that. If you missed out on that, make sure you take a look at the video again prior to this video. Today we're going to take a look at the requirements of Shehitah, that's Jewish slaughter, and also the koshering of meat. Those are two aspects that just because they're on the list of what's acceptable to eat, that doesn't mean that you can go ahead and eat it. It's not yet permitted until the way the animal is slaughtered is done in a process in which was given over to Moshe and to children of Israel. Here we find the fact of the necessity to rely on the oral tradition. In other words, the way God taught Moses and Moses taught the children to how to slaughter the animal. The Torah prohibits the eating of any clean creature in an animal or fowl which died of natural death, or roadkill, which had been killed in any other way than ritual slaughter, which we call Shehitah. And you shall not eat anything that has died of natural death. So if the animal basically croaked because of heat exhaustion, that's considered treifa or nevela, which automatically puts us away from being able to have the meat for consumption. And you shall slaughter of your cattle and your sheep as I have instructed you. Now, interesting, here's where we have the basis of the oral commandment to follow the rabbis, to follow the dictates of the oral law, something which the Karaites completely negate in this point. Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 21. What is a slaughter in accordance to with such instructions may be eaten. What is not is forbidden. So in other words, if the animal was not slaughtered according to the Jewish law and the way that it was taught from Moses to the children of Israel, then we can't have it. In essence, that's what Deuteronomy 12, verse 21 indicates. This is why the necessity of understanding the acceptance of the oral law. The details of this authorized method of slaughter, known as Shehitah, was transmitted through the oral law and is the only method of slaughter by which clean animals or birds retain their kashrut or remain fit to be eaten. The requirement of ritual slaughter applies only to meat and fowl and not to fish. Once you take the fish out of its natural body of water, it's considered, as it were, slaughtered, but it doesn't require slaughter at all. Just remove it from its environment, and it is unalive through the process of being deprived of the water substance. The Torah specifically excludes fish when it declares that the flocks and the herds be slaughtered for them, the fish of the sea to be gathered for them. So once you gather them up, they're considered like if it was slaughtered, but it's not being slaughtered. Numbers chapter 11, verse 22. This method of ritual slaughter is designed to cause the least pain to the animal and removes as much blood as possible. It also consists of a rapid to and fro cut of the throat by means of perfectly sharpened blade of adequate length that is free from the slightest nick and unevenness. So just a regular knife, you see this one here? If you notice, it has little ridges here. This would be completely unacceptable for that. The knife has to be clean and sharp, that you basically could run it and there's no nick on the knife. The method of ritual slaughter is designed to cause the least pain to the animal and remove as much blood as possible. It is a sharp blade that adequate length that is free from the slightest nick or unevenness. The slightest movement of the knife takes a fraction of a second and quickly severs the trachea, the esophagus, and the two vagus nerves, as well as the carotid arteries, and the jugular vein. All available evidence indicates that the consciousness is lost immediately, or almost immediately. Within 2 seconds, the Shehitah, that the cut itself is painless, and yet when an individual is cut by a razor-sharp blade, no pain is felt, but you feel it afterwards, as a time of awareness only develops later when the blood is seen or when the wound is rubbed, and there is no pain during the seconds that may elapse before the consciousness is completely lost. The world's most eminent physiologists and pathologists and other scientists qualified to be judged have declared that the Jewish method is to be considered the most absolutely humane method. Methods promoted by animal protections like PETA and other societies that pushes the idea of stunning the animal before slaughtering it would actually inflict injuries severe enough to render the animal treifa. Inflicted by most non-kosher slaughtering houses are in relationship to kosher slaughtering. The Shehitah cut itself may be regarded as an effective form of stunning because it affects the produce immediately, insensibility of the animal. So it basically is done immediate. In addition to the humanness of the Shehitah, the Jewish method carries with it another distinct advantage over most of the other methods, which ensures the complete and rapid draining of the blood from the animal rather than allowing the blood to congeal within the meat. This contributes to the keeping of prohibition against eating of blood. We are prohibited to eat blood, so we must remove it out from the animal and cover it because within the blood is the soul of the animal. It is undoubtedly true that the maximum blood drainage has many hygienic benefits. The shochet is not just a Jewish slaughterman. He must be a pious person. He must possess a thorough knowledge of all of those portions of the Shulchan Aruch which details the precise rules and regulations of the Shehitah as a condition of the animal's organs, which may render it treifa. He must pass a rigid examination and be duly certified by the rabbinic authorities to exercise the function of a shochet. Because of the piety and training and background, the shochet is also often called upon, especially in small communities, to perform other duties of Jewish religious functionaries. The Jewish method goes back all the way back to Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 21, which we already mentioned, that it refers to be slaughtered according with the instruction that was given. This is obviously an oral tradition dating back way thousands of years back. The Jewish method goes back. Its details are elaborated in the Talmud and the tractate Chulin, and codified in Shulchan Aruch, Yoredeah, chapter 1 through 28. Those of you who wish to become a shochet or wish to learn to be able to slaughter at least chickens, which is the more easier form, you can reach me and we can put you into a program which you can be certified as a shochet. Now, kosher meat, obviously one of the main things that is prohibited is the blood. It's the dam. The Torah forbids the eating of blood even when it comes from kosher animals and birds. It does not apply to fish blood, only to animal. And you must not consume any blood, either of fowl or of animal, thus letting absent as the exception the fish. Anyone who eats blood shall be cut off from his people. Now, what is this expression we always read about, being cut off, karet, from his people? What is the implication of that? Leviticus chapter 7, verse 26 through 27, and also Leviticus chapter 17 through 10 through 14. The idea that someone has blood, is eating blood, their soul would be cut off from the people of Israel. In other words, there's a disconnect taking place here, spiritually speaking. Some have said that karet also refers to premature death. A person could die prematurely. Now, to avoid the prohibition against eating blood, it must first be removed from the meat by two methods. And we're going to take a look at these two methods because these are the two methods of koshering the meat that has been slaughtered. The first one, or the first method, is soaking and salting, commonly called koshering. The method Number 2 is broiling over or under a flame in an electric oven broiler. In this process, the flame or electric heat purges the blood so it drips out on all sides. And obviously, whatever drips out, that is laid as not kosher. It would have to be kosherized again. Either the process of boiling or that of soaking and salting is required for meat and fowl. It constitutes another step in rendering kosher animals and fowls that have been properly slaughtered fit to be eaten, whether meat or fowl, even from kosher creatures that have been kosherly slaughtered, is cooked or otherwise prepared without the necessary prerequisites regarding the removal of blood in the required manner, it becomes treifa or non-kosher. During the cooking, the blood of the meat seeps out, and meat stew in its own forbidden for the blood, thus making treifa or prohibit the entire content of the pot or pan. So it's very important to understand how to do so, because once you use a pot or pan to cook and all of the blood comes out, that whole entire, the utensil as well as the water dripping is considered not permissible. So it's got to be thrown out, it has to be cleansed, talking about the utensil, and kosherized again. Now, koshering by broiling brings in to be done in a pan, but on the grill that allows the blood to drain off. The grill or the spit, which is unkoshered meat is broiled, should not be used for broiling meat, which had already been koshered. The raw meat must first be thoroughly washed down while on fire, and it should be slightly salted. By the way, kosher meat has high levels of salt, so it's a good idea to wash down the meat once it's been koshered, because the salt content is very strong. After the meat is almost done, it must be washed off in cold water to remove the blood that's clinging to the part of the meat. This satisfies the koshering requirements and then be reheated or broiling to continue to suit the taste or on another grill or spit reserved for the broiling of the koshered meat. Now, liver, which is highly excessive in blood, can only be prepared in this manner, cannot be prepared in salting or soaking, and it does not work on liver, and it may not be used on it. Koshering of soaking and salting, the meat must first be thoroughly washed down in running cold water, and then placed in a pail or of cool water and allowed to soak for at least a half hour. The meat must be entirely immersed in water, and this serves to soften the meat. Meat which became frosted during refrigeration should not be salted until it is allowed to thaw to room temperature. After a half an hour period of soaking, the meat should be thoroughly covered on all sides, inside and out the case, with a layer of medium coarse salt, what they call kosher salt. Salt or proper coarseness for this purpose is marketed in the U.S. as kosher salt. They're thicker in content. Ordinary table salt, too, is too thin, and it would tend to melt away and become absorbed into the meat instead of acting to absorb the blood from the meat. The salt meat fowl is placed on a flat surface, which is kept inclined on an angle to allow the blood to drain off, and is perforated drain board. It's only one opening, and like the grid to allow for the draining is used. It need not be inclined. The meat or fowl is kept in its salt for a period of 1 hour. So they ask you, well, how long do I have to keep the salt in the meat? 1 hour. And under the emergency condition, the time may be reduced to about a minimum of 18 minutes, similar to how quickly the matzah needs to be cooked or baked. After the hour, the salt should be thoroughly rinsed off under the running water. The meat or fowl is now ready to be broiled, fried, or baked. Broiling is done under a kosher grill or spit. And there's not the same ones being used, because once you basically put it in the grill or spigot to kosher the meat, you now need that the grill or the spit is now rendered not kosher because of the blood that basically landed on there, and thus it needs to be washed down and put on another grill or spigot in order to be able to eat it or prepare it for eating purposes. The vessel or pail used for the soaking of the meat or fowl should be used for any other purpose. Soaking and salting must take place as soon as possible after the meat is purchased. Now, nowadays, it comes from the factory already salted and already koshered and all prepared. But still, it is a good practice to wash down the meat because of its high content of sodium or salt. In any case, it should not be delayed more than 72 hours beyond the time of slaughter. And since the last time it was washed down, if it's not washed down every 72 hours and not koshered, there's not the process to make sure it's ready to be served, ready to be eaten, then you have before you kosher meat that basically went unkosher or unfit. This information is also available from the butcher. If a delay is unavoidable, the meat should be washed down thoroughly with cold water before the 72 hours elapse, and this prevents the blood in the meat from drying and congealing when its subsequent salting and soaking ineffective. Should meat be unavoidable kept beyond the 72 hours without being washed and without being koshered, it may no longer be soaked in salted. The blood can only be removed through boiling. An egg yolk found inside of a chicken must be soaked and salted. It should, however, lie in the salt apart from the fowl or at the upper or perforated board. Furthermore, such an egg yolk is not considered totally parve anymore. Parve means neither meat or milk. It may not be eaten together with dairy. It's now considered meat. Poultry, but meat. On the process of either boiling or soaking, salting has taken place. The excess blood has been removed. That which is still remained in it is regarded as the meat juice. It is now ready to be boiled, fried, broiled, or otherwise prepared rare or well done to suit the taste of the consumer. In recent years, most kosher butchers in the United States have been providing the additional consumer service, and upon the request of the consumer, they will soak and salt the meat for the customer. Because of the amount of kosher meat being sold, a lot of this process has already been taken care of. So when you buy meat, at the local meat market, kosher meat market, you can ask the butcher, but most likely it's already been koshered and salted for you, the consumer, ahead of time. But like I said, it would be a good idea to remove the sodium content by soaking it again. Kosher packaged fresh from frozen meats are always soaked and salted in a processing plant and will indicate such was taking place on the package. It's advisable also that frozen meat are always soaked and salted at the processing plant, and so is indicated on the package. It's advisable that all meat intended for freezer to be koshered by soaking and salting before it's frozen and stored away. This allows the housewife or the person at home to prepare the meat immediately after defrosting in any way they desire. If it was soaked without first being koshered, it is best to broil the meat after defrosting. Ground meat must be koshered before being grounded up. So if meat is grounded up before it is salted and koshered, it must not be eaten, and it is no longer treated as kosher. If cooked in a pot or broiled in a pan, it renders the utensil or vessels as non-kosher, unfit, or treifa. The use of an egg with blood spot is forbidden. Eggs used for cooking or baking should be carefully checked for blood. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we do when we even have regular egg, we open it up and we take a look. There's different ways of doing it. You can put it in a cup, or you can literally look to see around the circumference of the yolk to see if there's any blood or black marks in it. If that's the case, that means that egg has been developing and should not be used. Some will basically cut out the area of the blood and still use the remaining. It's recommendable you don't, because you don't know how far the blood has penetrated throughout the yolk. The role of the shochet and kosher butcher is one that we will be seeing in our next video, but it's of great importance so you know these rules of kosher eating. Keep kosher. It's good for your soul more than your body. Shalom Aleichem. Have a wonderful week.